I've got this old Volvo from 2012 that my family sarcastically calls a tank. The car is literally on its last legs, barely hanging on by a thread. It's had a million problems: brakes that feel soft, an engine that sputters, and half the electronics don't even work. But somehow, despite all of this, the damn thing still runs. My parents have been waiting for it to completely break down, giving them the perfect excuse to finally buy a new car. But for some reason, the car just refuses to die. And me? I'm the one stuck driving it. On top of everything else, the windshield wipers don't work. It's a nightmare driving in the rain. Even the smallest drizzle is enough to completely obstruct my view. And since I live in Nevada, the driest state, it's usually not a problem. I used to think the weather here was a blessing. But I learned the hard way that you can never take it for granted. I remember back in school, teachers always telling us how dry Nevada was. I guess I never thought about it too much, until I found myself caught in a storm. It was a couple of years ago, during a solo trip to visit my old friend Calvin. It had been years since I'd seen him, and I figured a long drive through the desert would be an adventure. I was excited for the long stretches of highway, the solitude, and the thrill of driving through the open desert. The drive to Calvin's was perfect. I spent a few nights at his place, catching up, drinking, and reliving old memories. But the drive back, that's where everything took a turn. As I crossed into Nevada, the storm hit. Not just a sprinkle or light rain, a full-on thunderstorm, complete with blinding lightning and torrential rain, came out of nowhere. The kind of storm that made the road look like a river, and the sky crack open like a scene from a horror movie. I realized quickly that this wasn't just a normal storm. It was one of the heaviest downpours the state had seen in years. And with the state of my car's wipers, I knew I was in trouble. I had no choice but to pull over. I found a spot a good distance off the highway, deep into the desert. I parked, making sure I wasn't visible from the main road in case any trucks or cars passed by. I didn't want to risk not being seen. I thought the storm would pass quickly, but the rain just kept pouring. The storm didn't seem to care how long it lasted. For a while, it was just me, my car, and the endless stretch of desert around me. I debated calling the police for help, but I didn't want to spend any more money than I had to. And honestly, I wasn't about to ask my parents to drive all the way out to help me either. So I sat there alone in the desert, waiting for the storm to subside. It felt like hours. Not a single car passed. Just the sound of rain hammering down on the roof of the car, and the occasional rumble of thunder. I think being alone in the desert started messing with my head because after a while I started feeling uneasy. I couldn't explain it. But I felt this strange urge to move the car, even though I knew I couldn't drive in this rain. My eyes darted from one window to the next, scanning the dark desert. But all I saw was miles and miles of emptiness. It was strange. I shouldn't have felt so uneasy, but something about being stuck here, alone in the desert, felt off. As the storm began to subside, the sense of relief was almost overwhelming. The rain slowed to a gentle drizzle. Maybe I could finally get back on the road. But just as I was starting to relax, I saw something in the distance. There were flashes. Bright, sharp bursts of white light darting across the desert. They were too bright for lightning, and they didn't follow any pattern. They jumped around as if they were coming from multiple places. My heart started to race. I couldn't make sense of it at first, but soon I realized those lights were coming closer. Fear gripped me instantly. I felt my palms begin to sweat, my breath shallow. I didn't know what it was, but my instincts told me that I was in danger. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone and scrambled out of the car. I ran to the nearest rock formation, hiding behind it, barely able to see through the rain. I crouched low, trying to make as little noise as possible. Every minute felt like an hour, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The lights came closer, and then I saw them. 3 figures moving toward my car, each holding a flashlight. Their movements were erratic. The beams of light flicked wildly through the desert, shining over my car and the ground around it. It was almost as if they didn't know what they were looking for, or maybe they were searching for something, or someone. I stayed completely still behind the rocks, my heart pounding in my chest. My head was spinning. What were they looking for? And then, without warning, one of them fired a gunshot into the air. I flinched, the sound ringing in my ears. It startled me so much that I bit down on my lip so hard I tasted blood. The pain was sharp, but the fear was sharper. I had to stay hidden. Every instinct told me to stay still, to stay invisible. I didn't dare peek out again. The seconds felt like they stretched into infinity. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. I slowly lifted my head and peeked around the edge of the rock. It was pitch black. The lights were gone. Had they left? Had they seen me? My stomach churned. I waited, heart in my throat. Then suddenly the lights flickered back on. The figures were circling my car again. This time it felt like they were deliberately taunting me. I couldn't stay here all night. I had to do something. I pulled out my phone, my hand shaking uncontrollably. I dialed 911, whispering into the phone, explaining the situation. The operator promised help was on the way. I hung up, feeling both relieved and terrified. But would help get here in time? And who were those people? The next few minutes felt like hours. Finally, I saw the faint glow of police lights in the distance. The second the lights flashed, the figures turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness. By the time the police car pulled up next to my car, they were long gone. I ran to the officer, relief flooding through me. The officer listened as I told him everything. He didn't seem particularly shocked, which somehow made everything feel worse. But at least he didn't tow my car. He waited out the storm with me, sitting through the rain and not rushing me to leave. I think about that night often. It's been years since that drive, and yet, I still feel the unease in the pit of my stomach when I think about the figures, the lights, and the silence of the desert. I haven't done a road trip since then. Maybe I never will again. The darkness is always watching. If you want more stories that send chills down your spine, like, share and subscribe to Dark Echoes. Stay safe or don't. We'll see you next time. What I'm about to tell you is the strangest experience I've ever lived through. My name is Mary, and it all started on a road trip a few months ago. My friend Carol and I were driving from Florida to New Jersey. We had just spent a few days visiting friends, and though it had been a fun time, we had to get back to our lives. It was supposed to be a simple, fun drive. Just the two of us, a car packed with snacks, good music, and plenty of time to catch up on everything we hadn't talked about in ages. Looking back, it would have been smarter to stay one more night at our friend's place, but I was eager to get home. We had planned to drive straight through, but as the hours passed, fatigue set in. After the sun had come up, my back started aching from sitting too long in one position. I told Carol we should pull over, get some gas, and maybe grab something to eat. After a few more exits, we took one that seemed promising, a town that advertised itself as a lively tourist stop. The signs for local attractions and quaint shops promised us the charm of a classic little tourist town, a place to stretch our legs. But the moment we drove in, something felt off. The streets were empty. The buildings looked run down, weathered and worn, as though they'd seen better days. It didn't match the picture-perfect image that the signs had promised. The place felt abandoned in a way that I couldn't explain. It wasn't the usual ghost town vibe, but something was definitely wrong. We drove into the heart of the town, the silence creeping into my thoughts. There was an unsettling quality to it, like it was frozen in time. Almost like it was haunted, but not in the way you'd expect. It was like the town was there but not quite alive. The first stop was a convenience store. As we pulled in, I remember the feeling of unease tightening in my chest. Everything seemed normal at first glance. Carol and I walked inside, picking out a drink and snacks. But then something strange happened. Carol was looking for a specific drink. She quickly grew frustrated when she couldn't find it. She made a big deal out of it, being the drama queen that she is. I indulged her and told her we could try somewhere else. I walked up to the counter to pay for my Gatorade, and that's when I saw her, the cashier. She was a woman, probably in her 30s, tall with dark brown hair. Nothing unusual, except she was wearing suspenders, which I hadn't seen anyone wear in ages. I thought it was odd, but I didn't think much more of it. I paid and we left. Carol pointed to another convenience store across the street, and we decided to check it out. But when we walked inside, I felt my stomach drop. The cashier looked exactly like the woman from the first store. Same hair, same face, same height, same everything. I froze. I stared at her, and I could tell she was starting to feel uncomfortable. Finally, I asked her if she had a twin or a sister. She gave me this strange look, like I just asked her a question from another planet. She told me she didn't have a twin, that she was an only child. She narrowed her eyes, clearly confused, and said, "That's a strange question to ask," which, to be honest, it was. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to explain, but she didn't respond. I backed out of the store, dragging Carol along. She was confused, but I kept insisting that something was off. When I told her about the twin, she brushed it off, saying I was probably just tired from driving too long. But I knew what I saw. Determined to prove I wasn't imagining things, we went back to the first store. When we walked inside, the cashier was completely different. The woman I had seen earlier was gone. Now there was a short, middle-aged woman with light hair. I was floored. There was no way she could have been the same person. It was as if the woman I'd seen before had never existed. I couldn't even explain it. Carol, noticing my discomfort, told me to let it go, that I was probably just tired and confused. But I couldn't. I knew what I saw. Still unsettled, we left the store and drove to the nearest gas station, hoping the strange feeling would go away. But when we pulled in, I couldn't shake the sensation that something was wrong. It was empty, completely deserted, except for our car. It should have been a routine stop, but it felt like we were in some parallel universe. After fueling up, I walked into the small building to pay, and when I came out, it was as though a switch had been flipped. The station, which had been empty a few moments ago, was suddenly packed with cars. The parking lot was full. It felt like we had missed some major event, like it had gone from an empty ghost town to rush hour in the blink of an eye. I could feel the eyes of every single person on us. The staring was intense, almost suffocating. I've never felt more uncomfortable in my life. Carol was starting to sense it too, and she agreed something was very wrong. It felt like we had stepped into a place that didn't belong, like we'd crossed over into another reality for a moment and then returned to find it changed. I didn't want to be there any longer. We decided to skip food and head back to the highway, but something about the entire situation lingered in my mind. We didn't speak much on the road. I wasn't scared, but my gut was telling me something wasn't right. As we got farther down the highway, we talked briefly about what had just happened. Neither of us could fully explain it, but we both felt that something had shifted. Then, out of nowhere, it happened again. A Toyota Sienna passed us. The windshield was cracked, with a huge spiderweb crack running across it, making it impossible to miss. Carol even made a joke about it, but we both remarked on how strange it looked. 10 minutes later, the same car passed us again. The same crack in the windshield. Same car. Same everything. I stared at the minivan as it sped by. How could this be possible? We had been driving at a fast pace, and there was no way it could have gotten ahead of us. Carol started panicking, urging me to speed up. I could feel my heart racing, but I had to keep calm, for both of our sakes. We sped up, but no matter how fast we went, I had this sinking feeling that the minivan wasn't going away. I glanced at the GPS and realized something strange. An hour had passed. How could that even be possible? We hadn't stopped, hadn't taken any detours. I tried not to think about it, but the entire situation felt surreal, like we were stuck in some kind of twisted loop. We eventually made it back onto the highway, and I didn't breathe a sigh of relief until we were finally away from that place. But even now, when I think back, it still feels like a strange dream, a dream I never want to experience again. I'm from New Hampshire. A few years ago, I was living just 30 minutes outside of Manchester, in a quiet town that wasn't exactly the kind of place you expected life-changing events to unfold. I had recently gone through a tough breakup with a girlfriend I'd been with for 2 years. It was a strange time in my life, a time where I was wandering, trying to figure things out, maybe searching for some meaning, though I didn't even realize it at the time. I'd always been close to my grandmother. She was extremely religious and went to church every Sunday. After my grandfather passed away, I started going with her, partly to support her, but also because, in my state of confusion, I felt like maybe I needed some grounding too. My grandfather had been a decorated war veteran, well respected in the community. Losing him had left a huge hole in her life, but even as she grieved, her faith remained unshaken. She told me that she knew he had been reunited with the Lord. I could see the peace it gave her, and I admired that. Faith like hers, the kind that brings real peace, is rare. It's something many people spend their lives searching for, even if they don't know exactly what they're searching for. One Sunday after the service, I met her. This woman who would change everything. She was a complete stranger to me, someone I had never seen in our small, close-knit community. It was strange considering how often I'd been to church, but there she was. Kaylee. Dark curly hair, deep hazel eyes, a presence that was striking in a way that kept me looking. I remember feeling this odd pull towards her, an attraction, yes, but also something else, a curiosity about the mystery of her sudden appearance. It was as if fate had dropped her into my life without any warning, and I couldn't ignore it. We started talking, and it was immediate. I can't explain it, but the spark was there. You know that feeling when you meet someone and instantly connect? It's almost like time stops for a moment. Kaylee had this quiet, almost mysterious charm, and I found myself drawn in. I asked her about her life, her family, where she was from, but she danced around my questions with humor and lightheartedness. She wasn't ready to share too much, but I didn't mind. It was fun bantering with her, and I could feel myself wanting to know more. After some playful teasing, she finally told me that her family had recently moved to the area, and she was attending college nearby. That's why I'd never seen her before. It made sense. I got her number that day, and over the next week we texted regularly and exchanged social media. I remember scrolling through her Instagram and noticing that she had so few followers. Most would find that odd, but to me it was refreshing. It felt real. The last thing anyone needs is to fall in love with someone everyone else already knows. We talked about all kinds of things, until one night she finally started opening up about her past. Her situation wasn't ideal. Her stepfather was an abusive alcoholic, and her biological father was even worse. I didn't press her for details. She didn't need to share more than she was ready for. But I could feel the pain in her words, and I wanted to help in whatever way I could. By the time the next Sunday rolled around, I felt like I knew her better, and I couldn't wait to see her again. I asked her out on a date after the service. She didn't hesitate. Her smile was enough to make my heart race, and we made plans for later that week. The days leading up to our date were filled with a nervous excitement. I couldn't stop thinking about her. Finally, the night arrived, and we kept it simple: dinner and a movie. It wasn't fancy, but it was perfect. We got to talk and laugh and just enjoy each other's company. It felt easy and natural. But I wasn't ready to let the night end. After dinner, I suggested a drive. Just the two of us, no distractions, the quiet night stretching ahead. We took the highway out of town, winding down one of those roads that's technically a highway, but feels more like a two-lane street, lined with trees on either side. The air was crisp and everything felt perfect. But I should have known. Things can change in an instant. What happened next is something I will never forget. As we drove, Kaylee started speaking, but it wasn't in English. The words were fast, mumbled, and they sounded like a language I couldn't recognize. French, maybe? Or something close to it. At first, I thought she was joking, trying to mess with me. But then I looked at her. Her eyes. They rolled back in her head, leaving only the whites showing. I swerved the car, almost crashing into the barrier. My heart was pounding in my chest. This wasn't some joke. She looked like she was in a trance, or worse, having a seizure. I pulled over to the shoulder, trying to stay calm. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my phone, calling for an ambulance. "I think she's having a seizure," was all I could manage to say. I kept checking on her. Her head was jerking slightly, and she was still speaking in that strange, incomprehensible language. I didn't know what to do. My fear was overwhelming, but I knew I couldn't touch her. I had to stay calm. But I wasn't calm, I was terrified. And then, just like that, it stopped. She snapped her head back to face me, her eyes returning to normal. She shut her mouth and blinked, looking at me with this wide-eyed, wild expression. I'll never forget that look. Before I could even speak, she threw open the car door and sprinted, full speed, into the woods. Ran straight into the woods. I couldn't move. My body was frozen, still processing what had just happened. My hands were trembling, my head was spinning. I watched her disappear into the darkness, and I couldn't understand it. I stayed in the car, unable to make sense of the insanity of what I'd just witnessed. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours before the paramedics and cops arrived. I told them everything, though it sounded insane even to me. They nodded, took my statement, and assured me they would do their best to find her. But they never did. After that night, she was gone. I never saw her again. I went to church hoping to see her, but she wasn't there. Her Instagram was deleted. She had blocked my number. It was worse than that. I had a friend text her number. It had been erased. I searched everywhere, online, through mutual friends, even asking people at church if they knew her. No one did. No one had ever seen her before. And no one has seen her since. I don't know what happened to Kaylee. I don't know if I'll ever find out. I don't live there anymore. My memories of home are forever tangled with this incident, a mystery that continues to haunt me. The darkness is always watching. If you want more stories that send chills down your spine, like, share, and subscribe to Dark Echoes. Stay safe or don't. We'll see you next time.